Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. This is your September 2020 Senate election prediction for the week of September 12th to September 18th. Now, this one's coming out a little bit later today due to the fact I am a bit under the weather, so forgive any vocal, let's just say, weirdness or gas weirdness. But if you can survive that, you'll get a pretty good prediction, in my opinion. Now, I've already filled in the safe seats for this election. The ones that are marked as likely are flips. So the Republicans are flipping Alabama, while the Democrats are flipping Colorado and Arizona, meaning the Democrats are already up one. Now, in my presidential election prediction, and I believe my last Senate prediction, I was a little bit of a complainer talking about how we just don't have any polling out. Good news! The gods listen to me and we actually have polling, namely an AARP poll. I'm going to go over that for tomorrow should my, level of speaking ability remain as is. Now, keep in mind, AARP polling is going to be inherently biased towards Republicans ever so slightly because they mostly use landlines, and their roles they're going to be pulling from initially are going to be the roles of the AARP, which is a, let's just say, skew older demographic. But anyway, but this is going to change a few things, and I will do my best to account for those issues. So let's start off with a few likely states, starting with Texas. Texas, likely Republican. I know I beat the drum with this one, but really it's true. Right now, John Cornyn, we're seeing him lose support. No doubt about that. He is dropping from mid-40s to low 40s in the polling. Constant, regular, but his challenger, MJ Hagar, is not picking up those voters. All those voters are doing is going to undecided. I cannot, in any good faith, believe the Democrats have a really good chance of winning until we see those undecided voters go towards Hagar. They aren't, they haven't, and unless something big changes in the next 2 months, they won't. And keep in mind, Hagar has just started running ads this week. So there could be a change. But for right now, I think Texas is way too solid to go to the Democrats, but Cornyn's not doing well enough for it to be safe. Another likely state is going to be Georgia's special election, and depending on how polling looks in a month, this is probably going to be a solid red. The two Republicans remain solidly in the lead, with the incumbent Republican with, I believe, around 25% of the vote, the challenging Republican with about 20%, the Democrat with about 19%, and then a mix of Democrats and Republicans going down, with the Democrats holding another 17% and the Republicans another 5% or so. Why there are so many candidates in this race while every other one just has two is due to the fact this is a special election in Georgia, and what they do is something called a jungle primary, where they just put all the candidates in the same primary, and whichever two get the highest number of votes, assuming no one breaks 50%, go to a runoff election. This is how California does all their races, for example. And right now it's looking like two Republicans are likely to be in the runoff. Now, we're talking 20 to 30% of Georgia is undecided, but that could be for many reasons. That could be Democrats not sure which Democrat they're voting for, or Republicans not sure which Republican they're voting for. Keep in mind, the polling keeps showing us with the Republicans holding about 46% of the vote solidly each time, maybe even over 50%, while the Democrats are holding about 30%. What the Democrats need to do is they need to poll, for lack of a better term, they need to get into the second round against the incumbent, Loeffler, because she is not very popular in the state, to put it lightly, and let's put it this way, she's not very popular, and she's in the middle of a corruption scandal, so a Democrat has a much better chance of winning against that than against the challenging Republican, or if they aren't in the primary, or if they aren't in the runoff at all, especially given the fact that right now, and I've been predicting this pretty frequently, it's looking like it could be a 50-50 split. So that Georgia special election could decide the Senate. But another likely, Alaska. Alaska's getting more competitive, but you're in a Texas area, except Alaska's a little bit better for the Democrats than in Texas. The challenger, Al Gross, running as an independent, has been gaining votes, while the incumbent Republican, Sullivan, has been losing them. What we need is another poll showing Gross ahead. Right now, we have two polls from the same pollster, Public Policy Polling. One that showed them both really low, like 30s level of support, but Sullivan was ahead. Now we've got one showing them both in the low 40s at about 43%. What we need is to figure out if Gross is actually gaining and overtaking, or if it's just now we're starting to see people realign and the Democrats are going to get their usual 46% in Alaska. Let's do a likely for the Democrats. North Carolina. Good old North Carolina has basically turned into a blue state this election. Maybe not at the presidential level. There's a lot going on there, but even the AARP poll, which is biased towards the Republicans ever so slightly, like I mentioned before, is showing North Carolina as being in favor of the Democrats, even if it's slightly. And I'm a broken record on this, but I'm a strong believer in the idea of if a poll says someone's winning by 51%, or not even 51, 50.001%, 100% of the time, it doesn't matter if the margin's 0.2%. That person wins. And that's what's happening in North Carolina. We are getting poll after poll after poll showing more people like the Democrat. The governor, stupidly popular. And that might just be enough to help, and the Republican incumbent senator is not. So that might just be enough coattails plus backlash against Trump to flip North Carolina. And I think it's likely enough that's a likely state for the Democrats. So now we come down to, Maine has moved from leans to likely, in my opinion. We have now received dozens and dozens of polls showing that at the end of the day, Maine Susan Collins does not have a solid chance of re-election. She is polling low 40s constantly across the board, while her a challenger, whose name briefly escapes me, is polling mid to high 40s. And that's really bad if you're an incumbent. That's why I'm so bullish on North Carolina being blue. Because if you're an incumbent and you're losing regularly, that's not a good sign. You should be ahead in the polls. You should have that minor default to your name. But they don't. So now we're left with our actual toss-ups. Now, I personally don't do toss-ups. I believe every race leans or tilts one direction. But these are your 5 toss-ups: Montana, Iowa, Kansas, Georgia, and South Carolina. So let's do the fun one first, South Carolina. South Carolina, I have moved from likely to leans. This is for one big reason. Jamie Harrison is polling well. The AARP poll showed him doing well. And, very key, Lindsey Graham doing poorly. South Carolina is now a noticeably more competitive election, as well as I believe one other poll has come out recently that showed it very competitive. And if Lindsey Graham is having trouble maintaining his lead or is even being slightly beaten, that's a sign that this race is getting a lot more competitive a lot faster. Because that means, to go back to Texas, guys are going from the Texas side of from the Republican side to, I'm not sure, to the Democrats. The second they make that second transition to the Democrats, that's when you need to be concerned as an incumbent, because those people won't go back easily. Another one for the Republicans is Georgia's general election, but keep your eye on this race. I think it could be tilt Democrat by election day. The way I do these, for the record, is I treat it as though the election were held today. I don't try and predict into the future, because then you get Nate Silver levels of uncertainty. You can see my video on that on my channel. Now, what we have coming out of Georgia. Remember that AARP poll I'm now using because AARP is a decent pollster, and also, and this is just a side note, they lean Republican, ever so slightly. It's just a default with elderly voters. However, This poll that showed North Carolina looking a little bit tight. Maine, well, you can't use Maine because they didn't use ranked choice voting. Republicans ahead in Iowa, Republicans ahead in Montana, showed the Democrats ahead in Georgia. That is a bad sign if you are running in Georgia. We're now getting polls where Ossoff, the Democratic challenger to Purdue, is slightly beginning to lead. He's inching his way ahead, and that's a sign Georgia is going to be really competitive. Months ago, like right before coronavirus happened, I was talking about a special election was going to be this, oh, it's really close, and Georgia's main election, no way. Completely flipped now. Georgia's main election, I think, could be tilt Democrat by election day. But like I said, keep your eye on this seat. Another one for the Republicans is Kansas. Kansas leans Republican. This is due to the fact that Marshall is still ahead. And Kansas is a historically Republican-leaning state. Marshall is the Republican running in the race. There is no incumbent, but the incumbent who retired was a Republican. His challenger, Barbara Boiler, is doing decently, but is always about 2 points behind him. If Marshall pulls 46, she pulls 44. If he pulls 42, she pulls 40. And when you look at polling trends, that's not a good sign when you're the challenger. You want to be gaining on your opponent. Even, like I said, it doesn't matter how much the person wins by, just that they're winning. So if Marshall is regularly winning by 2 points, then there's a solid chance he's going to win by about 2 points. Over to Iowa. Iowa is going from tilt to leans Republican because we're getting more polling. It is neck and neck in that state, but Ernst is still polling really well. And frankly, she's spouted some QAnon stuff, which I thought made her in a more dire position, but we're still getting some polling out of there showing she's in the lead. And so for right now, I can't in good faith go, oh, well, Iowa's in favor for the Democrats. Decent chance they'll take it. But right now, if the election was held today, you'd have to put the money on the Republicans. And lastly, Montana, which is going to anger some of my regular viewers, is now going from tilt to leans Republican. More polls are coming out. More polls are showing that current governor Steve Bullock is polling at high 40s, 47, 48%, but the incumbent Senator Steve Daines is polling about 50% exactly. Montana is historic for close races, especially when you have a strong Democrat. And I think Bullock is slightly gaining when you look at the polling trend. They used to the wider swath of about 2 months ago has begun to shrink, and they are almost in the margin of error. But they're not there yet. As such, I need to solidify Montana. I'm probably going to be backtracking on this next week when we get some more polling. I've heard we might have a University of Montana polling drop, though don't quote me on that, I'm not 100% sure. But this is what you're left with. 50-50, like I said, the Democrats really should be pushing down in Georgia, in my opinion. I think that's the new weak spot that they can push for, but also, like I said, Montana, Iowa, both of heck, even Kansas, these are tiny margins of error, distances. If they can just get a little bit more turnout, or, for the record, if we look at a low turnout Republican election, like if we overestimated Republican turnout, these states are going to flip: Montana, Iowa, Kansas, and Georgia. And then the Democrats go from 50-50 to 54. But yeah, right now you should feel good if you're the Democrats. You were not predicted to win this election. And now you're guaranteed to be walking away with half the Senate. And from the looks of it, a solid chance of taking the presidency. But it's not 51. And that's the magic number in the Senate. That's the number where you can start breathing again. So, with all that being said, if you like the video, leave a like down below, and also a comment. I always like hearing everyone's opinions. If you want to see more from the channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Otherwise, if you want to hear me outside of YouTube, I have a Twitter, @OneManThinkTan1, the Roman numeral, link down in the description below. Otherwise, as always, and most importantly, have a wonderful day.